welcome everybody to the July 2024 Move to France Q&A. My name is Allison Grant Lounes. I am the owner of the relocation agency Your Transformation. We help people to get the right visa and do the French admin to follow their dream of living in France. We work primarily with individuals who are self-employed, setting up businesses, retiring, moving on their own, so who are not necessarily being sponsored by a company or organization. And we provide everything from full service relocation packages to online courses where we support you in doing a lot of these admin tasks that you have to do as part of your move. I'm also the author of Foolproof French Visas. So the most recent edition is the complete 2023 edition. And I'm the admin of the Americans in France Facebook group. Before we get started, I want to let you know that today is the last Q&A of the 2023-2024 season. So the next one is going to be in September, and we'll be publishing that calendar shortly. Now, there are two more events that are coming up before I go on holiday and pause events for the season. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. France time, so an hour earlier, we're going to be hosting a Q&A on inheritance and succession. And that's going to be with an accountant for the inheritance tax side and a notaire who will talk about the different questions related to succession, inheritance tax, estate planning, and things like that when you are a resident of France. So I would highly recommend that. I'm going to give you the link in the chat so that you can sign up if you're interested. And then we also are going to have next Tuesday at 7 p.m., so the same time as this one, we're going to do a webinar with Helen of AXA. And we work closely with AXA Agence Internationale because they are the English-speaking AXA agency that works with clients all over France. And we're going to be doing a joint presentation on the French healthcare system. Helen will discuss the visa policy that you need to get as part of the visa application until you get on the French healthcare system. And then I will, of course, talk about the admin involved with registering for the French healthcare system once you arrive in France with your visa. Those are our two upcoming events. And then I am going to the States for a couple of weeks. We're not closed, but I will hopefully be going to the beach. And we'll be doing fewer events over the summer because people tend to be away. And then we've got a great slate of events planned for the fall. I also want to bring your attention to the programs that we offer. So we do have complete relocation packages where we're doing pretty much everything that we can for you, from the visa application to validating it to getting you on the French healthcare system and exchanging your driver's license and all of those types of things. We also offer two programs that are included for our clients, but they're also available separately. One is Fast Track to France, which is 9 modules covering all of the admin things that you need to do to prepare for a move and helping you to understand how a relocation to France works. We just finished updating that for 2024. We re-recorded some of the videos. We added a great presentation on culture shock and navigating adjusting to arriving in France. And we also have the Complete French Business Incubator, which is our program for people who want to be self-employed in France and write the business plan and things themselves. We just updated modules 0 to 5, and I'm finishing the rest of them by the end of the month. And we have included so much new information since the program was originally released. I'm really, really proud of it and excited for those of you that are going to use it for the visa application because it's really good, if I do say so myself. So without further ado, I am going to get into the questions that were pre-submitted. Now, I want to start by saying that I am not answering any political speculation questions. So if you submitted a question like that, I'm not going to answer it. I'm just going to skip it. I can't predict the future. There was a recent immigration law that was passed. About more than half of the provisions in the law that were implemented or tried to be implemented by right-wing members of Parliament were censored by the Constitutional Council of France. So in France, instead of the Supreme Court in the US, has 2 missions, which are one to determine whether laws are constitutional or not, and two, to ensure that the law is applied equally in all circuits in the US. In France, those are two different courts. There's the Cour de Cassation, which is the court that determines if the law was applied correctly in all the different courts of France and if it's being applied consistently. And then there's the Conseil constitutionnel, which is not comprised of justices, but it's comprised of former politicians. The former presidents are on it. And their job is to determine whether or not a law is constitutional. And so many of the provisions from the recent immigration law were determined to be not constitutional and were therefore not implemented. Anything that might be in somebody's political program would have to first make it into a law. The law would have to be passed. The passed law would have to pass the sniff test at the Constitutional Council. And of course, it would have to be conforming also with European law. So that's all I'm going to say about politics this evening. My job here is to talk about procedures and things as they are applied currently. Obviously, as things change, and they do change all the time, they change multiple times. They change from prefecture to prefecture and from year to year. And it's my job to know and follow the procedures in the most up-to-date way possible. But other than that, I can't really predict the future. That's all I'm going to say about politics this evening. All right, so let's jump into our questions. I'm going to start with the questions that were pre-submitted. If you have questions that arise, you can put them in the comments or the chat. And you can also, if you have questions that you were going to submit through the form, you can continue to add them. They'll just get added to the end of my list here. So, Hilloa, long séjour visiteur visa for Toulouse or Montpellier. If I buy a residence in France and apply for the visa, do I need to live there year round? If you apply for a 12-month renewable visa, then you are presumably going to be a resident of France, and they assume that you are going to spend at least 9 months out of the year living in France, and that would make it your primary residence. Can this type of visa lead to a residence or a French passport? That's a really complicated question. The answer that I give has historically been no. When you have a visitor visa, you do not sign a document called a contrat d'intégration républicaine, which is supposed to be a document that makes your visa type lead to a residence permit of some kind. So we cover this in Foolproof French Visa 2023. A contrat d'intégration républicaine is you do the OFI medical visit, you do an OFI language test, and then you have 4 days of stage or sort of training courses on how France works and how to integrate into life in France. You learn about like the values of the French Republic, different ways that the French administration works, and they try to help you to integrate into the French system. You also take a language class, and if you don't have a language level of at least A2, they're going to assign you a certain number of hours. Now, my understanding and what I communicate about the CIR is that it is how you get on a path to a 10-year residence card is by signing the CIR and by doing the mandatory classes. Now, anecdotally, I have heard of people who have renewed their visitor visa for 5 years or more, and were then able to secure a 10-year resident card. That is not at all a guarantee. I consider that a visitor visa does not generally lead to long-term residence. But I have anecdotally heard some stories about people recently, because you can't rely on people who did this 5-10 years ago or more, who have made that happen. Now, in terms of eventually applying for citizenship, the other thing to keep in mind is when you apply for citizenship, they are looking at your professional integration and your financial stability. One of the questions is, are you earning income and paying taxes in France? If you're American and you're retired and most of your income is coming from pensions and passive income that is not taxable in France due to the French tax treaty with the US, that's subject to interpretation because you're not technically paying taxes in France. So again, whether or not visitor visa is going to lead to potential for French naturalization, in my opinion, no. There have been people in the past that I know of for whom that happened. They came as visitors and eventually got a French passport. In my opinion, the rules have become stricter with them looking at professional integration and finances in terms of, are you paying taxes? Steve, if I get an auto entrepreneur visa, is it required to meet the 20,800 euro threshold to stay in France? Will they kick you out if you don't make that much? If you have sufficient savings to cover your living expenses, will they allow you to stay? When you have any type of business visa, they're looking to see, are you making minimum wage from the business? So they can be a little bit more lenient if it takes you a little time in the first year to get up to making minimum wage. If you're not quite there yet, but you have other income and you're able to cover your expenses, you can buy yourself a little bit of time to build up to earning minimum wage. Whether or not they would give you a multi-year card if you were not making minimum wage, that's a real question, and that's going to come down to the person evaluating your application at the level of the prefecture. Technically, they're not supposed to take into account other income, although if you have a huge chunk of savings or if you have retirement pension or something that complements your business revenue, they can, but it's not going to fly continuously for multiple years. At some point, if you are still not making enough money with your business, they're not going to renew you as an auto entrepreneur. However, you would be able to change your status to be a visitor. Are there any language requirements to stay in France for visas if you don't apply to become a citizen? So this is part of the new law that was passed at the beginning of this year. Currently, there's no language requirement to obtain a visa, and there's no language requirement for a 1-year card. However, if you are eligible for a multi-year card, now the language requirement is going to be that you pass A1 rather than simply go to the OFI class. For the 10-year card, the language requirement is going up to B1, and for citizenship, it's going up to B2. So previously it was you had to take a language class but didn't have to test out of it. And then it was A2 for the 10-year card and B1 for citizenship. So it's gone up a level. Property owner, remote employee of another country, retirement visa is not sure. What kind of visa is required if you want to live in France part of the year and on property that you own? So if you're not working at all, that could be a visitor visa. If you mean part of the year and not the whole year, and you don't want to be able to renew your visa, that would be a temporary stay visa. So you could get it for anywhere from 4 to 12 months. When it expires, you have to leave the country. You can't renew it in France, and there's no implication that you are going to stay long term, that you're going to be applying for residency or renewing it or anything. So if you have a temporary visa, this is what people with holiday homes get if they want to maintain their tax residence and whatnot in their home country, and they don't want to continually renew their visa in France. You can get a temporary stay visa. Can you own property and work remotely for another country while living in your property in France? So if you want to do that, that would require a visa that enables you to work in France, and it depends on what the company is willing to do. You could potentially be sent by the company to be an employee in France, in which case they sponsor your visa, they establish pay slips, etc. You can set yourself up with something called a portage salarial, which is you're an employee of the portage. The portage invoices your company outside of France and does all of the admin on your behalf for making you an employee. And then in that case, you could sponsor your own visa as a salaried employee or as a talent passport employee through a portage salarial. And I've actually made some contacts. I was at a conference in April and made contacts with a portage salarial company that can work on that. But if the company is not willing to do all of that and to potentially follow French labor law for having an employee in France, then your other options would be to set up a company that is in France that is invoicing a company outside of France. You could be self-employed and as auto entrepreneur and invoice a company. You would have to have multiple clients. You would have to show that there's no hierarchical relationship between yourself and the other company, which can be quite difficult in some situations. So there are solutions for working remotely, but you can't do it as a visitor. Jessica, my husband and I would like to purchase a home and live in France, but physically work in the US. Okay, so this is what we were just talking about. We would work half the year in the US and live the other half in France. Does a long stay visitor visa allow us to do that? If you're physically working in the US, like if you're leaving France to go physically work in the US, then there's not an issue necessarily with being on a visitor visa. However, a visitor visa presupposes that you're spending about 9 months out of the year in France. So it sounds to me like those two things are not really compatible. You could work for 6 months in the US and apply for a temporary visa for 6 months to live in France and then go back and forth and apply for a new visa at each time. But it doesn't sound like you're going to be in France for enough time each year to be establishing residence and get and maintain eligibility for a renewable carte de séjour. Zora, renewable visitor visa. What is the best way to set up French banking with a physical bank versus Wise before moving to France, meaning establishing a way to pay for an interim 3-month rental upon arrival, then pay for long-term rental and for the other expenses that will be incurred. So in order to open a bank account as a non-resident of France, you need to have some kind of economic tie to France. So that means either you own property or you're opening a company. So those are the two cases in which we have clients who are able to open bank accounts in France before they arrive. We work with AXA to do this, but yeah, either you're buying property or when we have clients who are setting up companies, so they're applying for a talent passport entrepreneur carte de séjour or visa, once they have made the capital deposit for their company and they have a certificate saying they've invested a certain amount of money, after they've done that, then they are able to open a bank account. But other than that, you're not going to be able to do it until you arrive. Zora, I think you might eventually be working with us, in which case that's one of the things that we include in our arrival onboarding sequence. So we have these email sequences that we send out to our clients telling you what to do in what order and guiding you step by step through the process. If you're one of our clients and you're receiving this email sequence, the day you arrive in France, it starts going out and it'll tell you when we're putting you in contact with the bank so that you can do that. But it's really easy to use stuff like Wise to pay for the first month's rent. And by the time you're paying for a long-term rental, you'll have the bank account set up. Peter, why, if you have funds from pension above the minimum wage and may want to be self-employed to make some additional money, does the business also have to make the minimum wage too? Why? Because that's the rule. Surely if you have enough passive income, that should be enough. It would be enough to live in France with a visitor visa, but when you get a business or self-employment activity visa, the burden of proof is to show that the business is viable and able to pay you minimum wage. What is the minimum health insurance cover for a 12-month long stay visa? We're being told it should be 100,000 euros, but the visa website is saying 30,000. So the requirements for a visa healthcare policy for a non-renewable visa is 12 months or 1 entire year, valid in the entire Schengen space, 30,000 euros of coverage, zero deductible, includes repatriation. Those are the requirements. If somebody is telling you differently, they're wrong. We work with a couple of different providers. We typically get multiple fee quotes for our clients so that you can choose the best policy for you. I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat a referral form. So if you want us to put you in touch and help you to get fee quotes for some of the insurance providers that we use for the visa, we're happy to do that for you. We do occasionally get commissions from the providers that we recommend, not all of them, but our goal is we want to refer people to multiple different services, get a couple of different quotes from people or providers that we know and trust and that we work with often, that we know provide good service. And then it's up to you as the consumer to make a decision about the one that you want. So we do sometimes get commissions, but we're not referring based on who's giving us a better commission, basically. Can you move on a non-working visa while developing a business and change it on the visa renewal after 12 months to a working visa for being self-employed? So if you come with a visitor visa, or if you want to change from any visa type A to any visa type B, first you want to renew your initial visa with the same mention at least once. So if you come with a visitor visa, you want to submit your renewal at least 2 months before your visa expires. You want to go and pick up the new card. So typically that's 2 to 3 months after your visa's expiration date, you'll get the new carte de séjour. Once you have that new physical carte de séjour in your hand, you can then make an appointment for your change of status. And that's going to depend on your prefecture, whether or not you're making an appointment or whether you're sending it by mail or whether you're doing it online. So if you're changing to a talent passport or a family one, those are all online. If you're changing to self-employed, like profession libérale, That's going to depend on your prefecture. And for Angoulême, I don't know off the top of my head what the procedure is. So it's not a good idea to come with a visitor visa and expect to change because the change of status process can take a long time. If you receive your new carte de séjour, you then make an appointment to change your status. Your appointment could be potentially 2 months away. And whether or not you're going to get a decision immediately is also going to depend on the prefecture. So it would be several months before you would be able to actually change your status and start your activity. Do you have any information about helping to move animals, horses, and sheep that are pets and not food? So we have a module in this on Fast Track to France. We work mostly with people, obviously, who are bringing cats and dogs. So I don't know the details for other animals off the top of my head. The maximum number of animals you can import is 5. So anything over 5 would be considered like a commercial import. So I'm not sure how many horses and sheep you have, but you would have to look into what happens if you go over that minimum. All of the information on the paperwork you need to import different types of animals is in our Fast Track to France module. Again, that's included on our client materials and then available in the program that people can purchase. Monica, I've heard it said that we need to have a permanent address for validation and renewal once we arrive in France. Is this true, or can we move around to look for a permanent location and validate online? Yes, you need to have a permanent address in France to validate your visa and to receive mail. There's a lot of reasons for that. So your visa can technically, like, OFI is not going to send you your convocation by physical mail unless we've had some people get it by physical mail if they use the same email address as a family member for their online account. Then one person gets it by email and one person gets it by mail. But in most cases, they're going to send it to you by email. However, you do need to change your address online every time you move. It is a legal requirement that you update the prefecture with your address. You have to provide a justificatif de domicile, like an electricity or utility bill in your name at your address. And so if you're moving around a lot and only have temporary locations, you are not going to have those documents. Also, to get on the French healthcare system, to exchange your driver's license, all of those things require having a physical address where you can receive mail reliably. It's not really an option to be nomadic when you move to France. You can certainly rent a really small apartment and travel around to different places and go back to check your mail or have somebody check your mail for you, but you need a home base and you need to have it within the first 90 days of being in France. I'm actually working on a checklist of things that you need to do, during your first week, your first month, your first 3 months, etc. Because a lot of people are missing some of these steps. Like they're not validating their visa with a long-term address. They're not opening a French bank account until they realize they need it at renewal. They're not getting onto the French healthcare system, or they're not sending in their application for the French healthcare system soon enough, and it doesn't go through before their renewal. There's a lot of steps that people are missing, and yeah, having a long-term address can sometimes be one of them. Okay, there's another question about France not having a digital nomad visa and how to work remotely. I covered that earlier with the different options. Irene, exchanging driver's licenses. I am an American with a Netherlands EU driver's license. What is the required time period from arrival when I need to switch it to a French driver's license? If you have an EU license, you do not have to exchange it unless you get points on it. You shouldn't have to exchange the license, I guess, until it expires. And then it's unclear to me. I don't know about the Netherlands. I know like certain countries you have to provide proof of address and all kinds of documents if it's expiring in order to renew it. I don't know what the Netherlands would require for renewing your license, if they would allow you to renew it even though you're no longer living there, or if at that point you would have to switch it over. Joan, I plan to be doing some work from France as an independent contractor with a current US company as my client. They don't want to pay me directly, but would pay my company. So if you're going to be on a profession libérale visa, you're going to be self-employed. That means you're not going to have a French company. You're going to have invoices as a self-employed person with a tax number related to your business, but you don't have the equivalent of a French company. We did talk about when I did a webinar with Isaac Bashisha, he's our accountant, he's Monceau CPA. We did a webinar with him on more complex French tax situations for Americans in France a couple weeks ago. And one of the things we talked about was whether or not there are legitimate circumstances in which you can set up an LLC. And his position is that there are some circumstances. What you want to do in that case is you want to make sure that you, as the self-employed person in France, are invoicing at least 80 to 90% of the income that the LLC has. You're invoicing that to yourself in France and paying French social charges on it. So, one legitimate reason for having an LLC is if the US company client wanted to pay an LLC and you wanted to have, for example, let's say you want to have liability insurance in the US for the activity that you're doing so that if anything goes wrong, nobody can sue anybody. You could have that in the US, and then you, as the self-employed person in France, are invoicing for a majority of the LLC's income so that there's no argument that could be made that you're somehow avoiding taxes by having most of the income go through the LLC and not paying French social charges on it. Like if you want, if there are good reasons to keep the LLC, you want it to be really clear to, let's say, some like future imaginary France auditor that it's a legitimate legal reason for having the LLC, but all the taxation is still happening through France and you have the right visa to be working remotely, which I know you're going to. When you register as self-employed in France, you will create an invoice with your French tax identification, your SIRET number, etc. You'll create an invoice for that for any billing that you do of anybody anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter if they're in France or not. And that business registration will start as soon as you have a long-term permanent address because they will also send you mail. If you're going to be self-employed auto entrepreneur, that activity should not be registered until you have a long-term address in France and your visa is validated. Okay, there's a political question from Mark that I'm going to skip. Teresa, we started a trust but never funded it. Do we still need to dissolve it if it has not been funded? Probably. That's a question for an accountant, not me. I would recommend asking it tomorrow at our estate planning and inheritance tax webinar. Trusts are a really common inheritance tax planning tool in the US that is not at all useful or relevant when you are a resident of France. What visa is appropriate if you don't want to work but wish to renew for multiple years? One that does not exist. The visitor visa is the visa that does not allow or require you to work. You have to just show that you have savings or income equivalent to net French minimum wage every month, but it is renewable every year. However, the renewal is now done online, so the only thing you have to do in person is go pick up the card when it's ready. How much money must a married couple show for resources for a long stay visa where they will not work? So again, that's net minimum wage. That's 1,400 euros per month times 12. That amount is good for up to 3 household members. So if you are a couple with one child, it's still 1,400 euros per month times 12. So either that amount, it's 16,800 euros, I believe. Either that amount in cash in an account or a French bank account showing regular incoming transfers of at least 1,400 euros that you will show all of the bank statements at renewal. Marie, entrepreneur profession libérale visa. Should I incorporate in Estonia while waiting to grow my business from outside France? No, not unless you want to try to evade French taxes, which I do not recommend. If you're not in France yet, then maybe you could do that. But once you're in France, you're going to want a French-based entity, not an Estonian-based entity, because regardless, either the Estonian company will have to pay you as a salaried employee or something in France with French social charges because the company has employees in France and it will have to do French accounting. So you're not saving yourself any trouble. You're just complicating things. I don't think Estonian incorporation will do anything useful for you if you are not living in Estonia. All right. Another political question that I'm skipping will very likely be unconstitutional for services to be restricted to French citizens. Sally, can you recommend the best health insurance? I am a little bit confused by the hugely different price ranges. So we have a couple that we recommend regularly. Typically, we work with AXA and with Fab French Insurance. I'm going to put our referral questionnaire in the chat again so that you can fill that out if you would like us to send you to our people and help you get quotes. Sue, how far in advance of moving to France should one apply for the long stay visa? You can apply up to 90 days before. You don't have to apply that far in advance. I would say that you want to leave an average of a month between application and departure date. That's more for your own sanity than for anything else. Typically, our clients get their visas back much more quickly than that. But obviously you don't want to like apply exactly 1 week before you're leaving because it will make you very nervous. So we advise leaving a month, but anytime up to 90 days before your departure date is totally fine. Other than renting an apartment for a year, what is the best way to satisfy the location requirement? I'm not sure exactly what that question means. From the perspective of the visa application, you can have a temporary address that you put on your visa application. Normally, we recommend, depending on where you're going, we recommend 4 to 6 weeks of an Airbnb while you look for long-term housing. If you're going to a city that has a notoriously difficult housing situation, like let's say Nice, Montpellier, Paris, those are the main, I mean, anywhere on the Riviera really can be quite difficult, especially at this time of year. Then I would recommend 6 to 8 weeks. But again, you really want to hit the ground running and secure long-term housing as quickly as you can. Long-term housing with a primary residence lease, which is not Paris Attitude. It's not any of the temporary expat apartment search places, none of those. Finding a long-term lease within the first 2.5 months so that you can validate the visa by that 90-day mark. I have validated visas with a temporary address before. I really hate doing it because it just creates so many admin problems going forward. Michael, what opportunities are there for RNs who do not speak French yet? I assume by RN you mean like a nurse RN and not a Rassemblement National. Unfortunately, not many. Anything medical really doesn't convert to France. So I would explore a career pivot. The qualifications don't transfer. And you would have to take an exam and get into medical school and do medical school courses in French in order to get into nursing. And it's not at all the same career. Nursing is very much not respected, not well paid career here, where it's a lot of grunt work and it's not as, let's say, satisfying and fulfilling as it might be in the US, unfortunately. Angelica, is it easier to initially qualify for the 1 year long stay visa carte de séjour and then pursue getting, okay, that's not a thing. So I assume you mean visitor visa, and then pursue getting one of the entrepreneurial visas once you're there, having secured a place to live and made some contacts. What is the easiest entrepreneurial visa to get? Still unsure of what kind of business to offer. I'm a plant-based chef, nutritionist, consultant for humans and pets, certifications in yoga and meditation. Okay, so there's no easier entrepreneurial visa to get. And this applies across all visa types. It's not that there's a visa type that is easier to get. There is a visa type that fits your situation that is the appropriate one for you to apply for. So if you are going to be self-employed, if you have a job that has low expenses, if you're going to have multiple clients, you're probably going to want a profession libérale. And that is maximum 77,700 euros of income per year. You can't deduct expenses. You pay, starting today, it's 23.1% social charges off the top if you're providing services. And you're going to have to show that you're earning minimum wage from that at the end of the first year. There are other visa types related to being self-employed that are for starting companies. There's the Passeport Talent Entrepreneur, which is if you have 5 years of professional experience, you're making a 30,000 euro investment in the social capital of your company. It could be a good solution to start a company if, one, you have some business expenses, two, you anticipate making more than 77,000 euros within the first year or two. One of the things that I put together in the new edition of Complete French Business Incubator is a comparison chart. Let me pull it up and I'll see if I'll give you a little sneak preview into something that I created for the new CFBI. So this is a document in CFBI that you can download where you can compare the 4 different types of business structures. And basically you put in your income from services, your business expenses, etc. And it will calculate the net amount in your pocket based on the business structure that you choose and the types of expenses you put in. The way I show it to you, you have business income, you have a set amount of expenses, and the chart is going to show you what your best business structure option is going to be. So that's something that's in our new version of Complete French Business Incubator. There's also what I call the classic entrepreneur visa. It used to be called commerçant. It's if you're starting a company, but you're not making the 30,000 euro investment, there's no minimum. And you don't necessarily have a master's degree and 5 years of professional experience. So again, you're creating an actual French company. You're able to deduct expenses. There's a lot of stuff you have to do to set up the company before you actually apply for the visa. And then with the classic entrepreneur visa, you only get 1 year. It's similar to the profession libérale. So by the end of the first year, you have to show that the company is earning money and able to pay you. Whereas with talent passport, you get 4 years. So you have a little bit more time to make your business profitable and allow it to pay yourself before having to prove anything to the prefecture about its viability. So really, it depends when you're developing a business plan, and this is what we cover in Complete French Business Incubator, and this is what I do in my one-to-one work with clients who are developing their businesses, is you don't want to be all over the place in terms of what you're offering. You want to come up with a coherent service offering or product offering. We have some people selling products, but it's mostly services. And then you want to develop what your income is going to be and what is the appropriate business structure and visa type for that business structure. It's not at all about what's the easier one to get, because the easiest one to get is the correct structure or the correct visa for that structure. And the way that you get it is showing that this is my business idea, this is my income and expenses, this is how I selected my structure, this is how I'm going to find clients, and proving, demonstrating every step of the way that you've done your homework and that what's going to be required to make that business viable and a success. All right. Do you think it might be better to come to live as a visitor, already collecting Social Security in order to show income? I can if I have to. It won't be more than $1,000, but it would be steady income. $1,000, unfortunately, is not enough unless you also have some cash savings. Again, the amount that they're looking for is 1,400 euros per month, so times 12. They either want to see that in cash or they want to see regular pension payments, regular like 401k distributions, whatever. And it can be a combination of savings and pension. It doesn't have to be all one or the other, but $1,000 a month is not enough. Okay, so let's go to the questions that have been submitted in the chat here. All right, what's the best way to find a medical professional who offers natural hormone, not synthetic therapies? I would go to a pharmacy because pharmacists are trained in like naturopathy as well as in traditional pharmacological drugs. So I would talk to somebody at a pharmacy first. If you want to be self-employed but only work part-time, is the minimum wage prorated? No. No. If you are self-employed, then you need to show that you're working, that you need to show that you're earning French minimum wage. French minimum wage as of right now is 1,767 euros per month. So if you can show that by only working part-time, great. If you charge 100 euros an hour and you work 18 hours a month, that's enough. And we have some clients who they have some clients in France. They have US clients or companies that are used to paying big bucks and they're paying American rates. And our clients are not having to work full time to make that full-time income. Okay. If you are retired, own a home in France, and pay property taxes, is that considered sufficient to meet paying taxes criteria that you mentioned? Normally not. I assume that you mean that I mentioned for applying for naturalization and long-term residence and things like that. Normally, no. But that's one of the things that's kind of subjective. Property taxes in France tend to be about a couple thousand a year, maybe, if you own a house, maybe 2,000 a year. It depends a little bit on where you own the house because communities can set their own rates and it will depend on how big your house is and how many rooms it has and whether you have a pool and things like that. But property taxes are not like tens of thousands of dollars like they can be in certain areas in the States. Yeah, that doesn't really do much for you. Joni, could I own and publish several niche English language newsletters as a business under the Profession Libérale visa, or would I need one of the entrepreneurial visas, like créateur d'entreprise, with a 30,000 euro investment? I understand there also may be requirements to digitally publish in France. If you it depends on what your expenses are and how much money you anticipate making. We do have a client who is going to have a digital magazine, and she's doing a talent passport création d'entreprise. It's part of a longer term strategy. Like, the magazine part of her business isn't necessarily going to make a ton of money in the first year or two, but it's part of a long term strategy. And I mean, with a magazine, you might have more publishing expenses. You might sell ads. You might have to pay a larger amount for an email list and things like that. So there would be expenses involved. I would recommend really thinking through what your expenses are, and then in the Complete French Business Incubator, using that comparison chart to compare what the best structure is. A digital magazine or a digital newsletter could be something that takes a little bit of time to get set up and make money. So if that's the case, would you be better off with making the 30,000 euro investment, having the 4 year carte de séjour rather than just 1 year, because then it buys you more time to develop the newsletter and the audience and the income that you wouldn't have if you had a 1 year profession libérale. So that can be a determining factor as well. Jay, if you are retired and over 65, do the language requirements still apply for a 5 to 10 year residency card and applying for citizenship? They don't apply for the residency card. They do still apply for citizenship. It used to be that if you were over 65, you were exempt from the language requirements for citizenship, but that is no longer the case. And it's been a couple of years, so this is not part of the new rule. Okay, affordable Italy. Back to insurance. Is it true that once we've applied for healthcare at 3 months, they will pay you back for any out of pocket from that date of application until you receive your carte vitale? Yeah, so once you get a letter saying that they've approved your file, they will reimburse you from that date. Typically, that's the date that your complete application is received. Now, unfortunately, if they go back and forth with you on documents for a long time, then it's from whenever they accept the file, not necessarily when they first received it. You're a little bit at the whims of SEPAM in that situation. Is it possible to get a recording of the webinar with the tax consultant? Yes, let me give you, we have all of our webinars now are being set up as evergreen events, so you can register to get the link to the replay, and you should get it immediately. Okay, yeah, the thing about the Estonian company from the US, I don't know why you would do that instead of just using a US company. I'm not sure that there are any advantages to having an Estonian company for dealing with French clients. I own an apartment in Paris, but it's rented out. Would I still be able to claim it as a domicile for the first year? I mean, not if you don't live there. Wanting to move in personally to an apartment is one of the motives for being able to end your tenant's lease. If you lease it out as a furnished rental, you can give your tenants notice 3 months before their lease is set to renew. There's very specific ways that you need to do this. So make sure to seek good advice. You know, you have to send them a registered letter. It has to contain certain information and formulas and whatever. If it's an unfurnished property that you rented out, then it's 6 months before the lease renews, and a lease is valid for 3 years. You want to look at when the lease was signed and what type of lease you signed. If it's a secondary residence lease, then it's not something that automatically renews. And in that case, you can just end the lease when the lease ends and not have to do anything. I mean, still tell them, because people need to plan their lives. But and the other thing it's important to know is when you give your tenant notice, then they can leave without notice. Normally, your tenant has to give you 1 month's notice for Paris that they're moving out, and they have to pay 1 month rent. But if you say July 1st, your lease renews on October 1st, but I am going to move in, so it's not going to renew, then they can move out on July 2nd and stop paying rent with no notice. So just so you know. What about American Hospital in Paris? What about American Hospital in Paris? Is this about the nursing question? You still need to have like French credentials to the American Hospital in Paris was like started by Americans, but there's not a whole lot that is American about it, except the fact that it's way more expensive than other hospitals. It's an LMNP, so yeah, so you just have to stop. Yeah, you just have to stop. You just have to notify them that you're not renewing, and hopefully you have honest people who will actually leave. Okay, I did get that it was about the nursing question. All right, so I have gotten up to date with all of our submitted questions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat. If you would like to schedule a consultation with me, I do offer 1 hour paid consultation so we can go more in depth to any of your questions and all of your questions. Amount for a consultation is credited to a package if you do end up signing up for any services with us going forward. If you are interested in working with us, typically that's the best way to go about it is to have a private consultation with me. We talk through everything and then you have a credit code that you can use either for a proposal that we send you or to sign up for one of our programs like Fast Track to France or the Complete French Business Incubator. Let me give you a link again to the 2 upcoming events that we have. So again, we have the inheritance and succession. Yes, Fast Track is counted as a package. If you have a consultation, then you can apply the credit for the consultation to the cost of Fast Track. All of our programs include time with me. They include consultations. If you sign up, for example, for the Complete French Business Incubator, it includes 2 calls with me and it includes a visa application review. So you upload all of your documents. I read them. I record a little video giving you my feedback. You're not just having to do this on your own. There is a ton of information packed into both of these programs. So it can be a lot, but you don't have to just do it all by yourself. You can ask us questions about things. All right. So two more Q&As before I go on holiday. There's tomorrow's on inheritance and succession and inheritance tax. And then there is next Tuesday's French healthcare system Q&A. The next Move to France Q&A is going to be September. We are still taking on clients who want to get to France before the end of the year. So do reach out if you're looking towards starting the process. And that's it. Thanks everybody for coming. And I will look forward to hearing from you. And let me just put my email in the chat as well. It's welcome@yourtransformation.com. And that's the best place to get in touch with us. All right. Have a wonderful month of July. Happy 4th. Happy Bestie Day. Happy summer. And I will see you in September or maybe before that. Have a good one. Bye.